Good morning to my beloved lecturer, Dr. Himalata Naranayanai. My name is Muhammad Zulmi bin Zamri. My student ID is 0371560. And today I will be presenting the topic, which is to what extent does the doctrine of judicial precedent promote consistency and flexibility in the English legal system. The doctrine of judicial precedent, also known as stare decisis, is a central feature of the English legal system. It requires judges to follow legal principles established in earlier cases when deciding current cases with similar facts. This ensures consistency, fairness, and predictability in the law. However, the doctrine also includes mechanisms that allow the courts to adapt and develop the law when necessary. Now we will explore how the doctrine promotes both consistency and flexibility by examining court hierarchy, the roles of ratio decidendi and obiter dita, methods such as distinguishing and overruling, and key cases that will demonstrate its practical application. In the English legal system, the court hierarchy plays a key role in maintaining consistency. Decisions made by lower courts, for example, the Supreme Court, formerly the House of Lords, sets binding precedent that all lower court must follow. In the case of London Street Tramways versus London County Council, 1989, the House of Lords ruled that it should follow its own past decisions to uphold legal certainty. This strict approach was later relaxed with the Practice Statement 1966, which allowed the House of Lords to depart from its own previous decision when it appears right to do so. This marked a turning point as it introduced flexibility at the highest level of the court system and allowed the law to evolve when justice required it. Judicial precedent is built around two key concepts: ratio decidendi and obiter dicta. The ratio decidendi is the legal reason for a decision and is binding in future cases. In contrast, obiter dicta are comments or examples given by a judge that are not essential to the decision and are not binding, though they may be persuasive. A famous case example is Donovo versus Stevenson, 1932, where the House of Lords established the principles that manufacturers owe a duty of care to consumers. This legal principle formed the ratio of the case and became the foundation for the modern law of negligence. The judgment also included broader comment about duty of care to one's neighbor, which were obiter dicta but later helped in developing the law further. This concept helped maintain consistency by clearly identifying which part of a case are to be followed, while also offering flexibility for future cases to draw on a useful reasoning. Despite the importance of following precedent, the doctrine also provides mechanism that allows judges to avoid or depart from earlier decisions when appropriate. One such method is distinguishing, where the judge finds that the facts of the current case are different enough from a previous case, making earlier ruling not applicable. This case was illustrated in the Balfour versus Balfour, 1919, where the court held that a domestic agreement between husband and wife was not legally binding. In contrast, in the case of Merritt versus Merritt, 1970, where the couple had separated and put their agreement in writing, the court decided it was enforceable. The factual differences allowed the court to distinguish the cases and reach a different outcome. Another method is overruling, where a high court decided that a previous decision made by itself or a lower court was wrong. In the case of R versus Shiftbury, 1986, the House of Lords overruled its own earlier decision in Eddington versus Ryan, 1985, admitting that the previous ruling had been incorrect. This case demonstrates that the courts are willing to correct their own mistake to ensure the development of the law. Similarly, reversing occurs when a higher court changes the outcome of a lower court in the same case. This happened in the case of R versus Woolley in 1999, where the House of Lords reversed part of the Court of Appeal's ruling regarding the definition of intent in criminal law. This mechanism allows law to remain flexible and responsive without undermining its authority. Such landmark cases have also shown how precedent can be used to adapt the law to reflect changes in society. In the case of R versus R, 1991, the House of Lords ruled that a husband could be guilty of raping his wife, overturning the outdated common law assumption that marriage implied automatic consent. The court recognized that social values had changed and that the law needed to reflect modern views on consent and personal rights. Another example is Adel NHS Trust versus Blind 1993, where the court permitted doctors to withdraw life support from a patient in a persistent vegetative state. This sensitive and complex case helped clarify medical law and ethics, showing that precedent can be used to address new moral and legal questions. Even though the doctrine of precedent supports consistency, there are exceptions that give judges the flexibility to do justice in the individual case. In the case of Young versus Bristol Airplane Co. Limited, 1944, the Court of Appeal set out 3 situations where it is not bound by its previous decision, where there are conflicting decisions, when a decision was made per incurrum through lack of care, or when it has been overruled by the Supreme Court. These exceptions are narrow but important because they allow the law to move forward without losing its structure. Legal academics have recognized the strength of doctrine in precedent. As per Rupert Cross, in his book, Precedent in English Law, explains that precedent helps build a stable and reliable legal system by following past decisions, but it also allows development when needed. A.L. Goodhart argues that correctly identifying the ratio decisionality is crucial to applying precedent properly in the future cases. This ensures that the law develops in a consistent and logical way. Randy J. Kozel, in his article, The Scope of Precedent, supports a flexible approach. He argues that courts should not treat past decisions as strict rules, but rather focus on the reasoning behind them. According to the Randy J. Kozel, this approach helps judges applying precedent thoughtfully and ensures that the law evolves in a principled way. To conclude, the doctrine of judicial precedent promotes both consistency and flexibility in the English legal system. By following earlier decision, it ensures that the law is applied fairly and predictably. At the same time, judges have tools like distinguishing, overruling, and reversing that let them adapt the law when necessary. Important cases and academic views show that the doctrine strikes a careful balance between stability and progress. This balance is what makes judicial precedent such a powerful and a lasting part of English common law. Thank you, that's all from me.